So we'll begin with the growth and development section today. Growth and development topic. First thing is this is part of paper 1 in optional and part of G2 in Indian Economic Service. So in Indian Economic Service, it is part of General Economics 2 paper. General Economics 2 paper has in fact 8 subtopics. Out of those 8 subtopics, one subtopic is growth and development. The G2 basically begins with the economic thought, national income accounting, financial and capital market, then the macro, then growth and development, then the international economics, balance of payment, global institutions. So one part is basically the growth and development section. And for optional, it is part of paper 1. And paper 1 has in fact 5 subtopics: advanced micro, advanced macro, money banking and finance, international economics, and growth and development. So generally the weightage of growth and development is significant. That means generally you will have about 3 to 4 questions every year from growth and development section. And out of those 3 to 4 questions, 1 or 2 questions will always be based upon the growth models. So first we start with the growth model topic, and this growth and development, as far as optional paper is concerned, this growth and development will include all the models of growth. Then it will also include, in this section we will also be doing all welfare indicators like HDI, ISDI या gender related जितने भी indexes है. So all index of development or human development. This will also include the planning. This will also include the environmental economic section. But in economic service, environmental economics is part of G3. Clear? So when we study here, we will be basically dividing this growth and development also into 2 parts. One part will be all models of the growth, starting from the Solow model, then Lewis model, Harris-Todaro model, Harrod's model, Harrod-Domer model, critical minimum effort, balanced growth approach, unbalanced growth approach. So there are different models. If you try to make a list of it, it will be around 15-16 different models. So one part will be related to all the models of economic growth or development. So I will make a list of it, and the second part will be the remaining part of the growth and development. So remaining part will basically include like welfare indicators, planning, role of agriculture in development, role of MNC in development, and environmental economics as well. So that environmental economics will be separately dealt in G3 paper of economic service also. But वहाँ पे content थोड़ा ज़्यादा है. So what we are doing basically the common aspect, common between ES and the ES. So first try to make a list of all the models of growth. So I am just preparing a list of models that we will be covering. So because that will basically help you to organize the syllabus. So just write the different models in growth and development. You can start with Solow model or neoclassical growth model, sometimes also written as the neoclassical growth model. So neoclassical is a Solow model. Then second, remember there are many subparts within this model also. There are various subtopics within that model also. So in that model, basically if I just give you a brief part, then model basically say that GDP of economy, whenever I write Y in macro, it is basically the gross domestic product or aggregate output. So GDP of economy is a function of stock of capital and labor. And if you write it in terms of the function, if I write it as A capital to the power alpha, labor to the power 1 minus alpha, it means Y, that is GDP, depends upon A, which repair their technology, B, capital is a stock of capital like plant and machinery, and third is labor force. Third is labor force. So GDP of the economy is a function of what? It depends upon what? Technology, it depends upon capital, it depends upon labor. That means if we want a growth of output, then it can be due to growth of technology or growth of capital or growth of labor. So growth of labor is population growth rate, growth of capital is investment, and growth of technology is technological improvement. So as per this model, the GDP of the economy depends upon, it depend upon what? Depend upon technology, it depend upon capital stock, it depend upon labor force. So naturally the growth of GDP will depend upon the growth of technology, growth of capital stock, and growth of labor. So first we will be starting with this, then it is a Harrod model. Harrod model will talk about three different rate of growth: actual growth rate, warranted growth rate, and the normal growth rate. And if they will differ, then what will be the impact? So what is the meaning of actual growth rate, what is warranted growth rate, and what is natural rate of growth? Third, Domer model. There is a combined effort as well. It is referred as the Harrod-Domer model. Harrod-Domer model. See, generally when we study these initial growth models, the common aspect of all these growth models is that economic growth is an outcome of accumulation of capital. What is common between all these is economic growth is an outcome of accumulation of capital. And what is the meaning of accumulation of capital? Accumulation of capital is nothing but investment. So economic growth is due to investment. Investment is the root cause behind all economic development, and for all economic growth and development, if I say that economic growth or development is due to investment, then in order to make investment you need the saving also. So saving is critical for all economic growth and development process. So start के जो growth process हैं, they are basically focused on investment part or capital accumulation. Initial growth, these models are also referred as the exogenous growth model. You will refer these models as exogenous growth model. Why it is called exogenous? It is called exogenous means because it is called exogenous mainly because we say that growth of economy depend upon growth of technology, growth of capital, and growth of labor. But what determines the growth of technology? Not explained in this model. It will simply assume that there is a given technological progress without explaining what determines the technological progress. That explanation will be lacking in which model? Exogenous growth model. And you will find that explanation in which model? Endogenous growth model. So endogenous growth model will explain that growth depend upon technology. Then it will go on further to explain that technical progress growth rate will depend upon what proportion of labor force will go to research, what is the productivity of the researcher, whether research are duplicated or not. It depends upon the stock of knowledge also. So it will go on elaborating those parts. So that will be part of endogenous growth model. So in that endogenous growth model, we will begin with fifth, AK model, where production function will be simply explained as Y is equal to AK. Then sixth will be Romer model. Romer model. Seventh is human capital and growth. Human capital and growth. Human capital and growth. See, in the initial part we say that growth depend upon capital, but this is which capital? ये physical capital है, plant और machinery की बात हो रही है. Later on we go on to explain that growth also depend upon how we accumulate human capital. So just as we accumulate physical capital, similarly we accumulate. So to accumulate physical capital we require saving. So to accumulate human capital also we require saving. So one part of the saving will go on to accumulate physical capital, other part of saving will go on to accumulate the human capital. So human capital will be highlighted in that model. So these are part of or examples of the exogenous rather endogenous growth model. ठीक है, यहाँ पे रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट का जो पार्ट आएगा दैट विल बी ऑल्सो एडेड. So initial part is you can say exogenous, and these three are given as example of endogenous growth model. But all are basically focusing on the capital part, physical capital and the human capital. Some growth models also emphasize on the labor. So I have written 7, write down from 8th. Lewis model. Lewis model actually talks about dualism, and dualism means coexistence of. Dualism actually means coexistence of traditional sector and modern sector. Traditional sector and modern sector. Traditional and the modern sector. Traditional sector you can relate with agriculture, modern sector you can relate with the industry. So to begin with, more and more labor is available in traditional sector. Over a period of time, labor will migrate from traditional sector to the modern sector. So that migration of labor from traditional to the modern will change the structure of the economy also. And that process will be explained by Lewis model, which will be further refined by, we can say, Lewis Aranis Fay model. Lewis Aranis Fay model. It will be further refined by Lewis Aranis Fay model. And this just remember it is structural chain theory of development. Structural chain theory of development is a Lewis model. Then next will be Harris-Todaro model. Harris-Todaro model. This is classical theory of rural-urban migration. Classical theory of rural-urban migration. So it will focus on that part. Remember, जितने भी मॉडल आप पढ़ते जाएंगे, each and model will highlight one dimension of the growth process. Growth and development is basically a multi-dimensional concept, particularly development. So there are various dimensions of the growth and development process. It is not feasible for any single model to explain all. So each model will take one dimension of the growth and elaborate it. The other model will take another dimension of the growth and that will elaborate it. That is why we are studying different growth models. So that one growth model is the Lewis and model, and second is Harris and Todaro model.
Sir, structural chain theory model is Rani Fay model.
Structural chain theory model is Lewis model. Lewis model को better way में present किया गया by Ranis and Fay has added a graphical representation of the Lewis model. So this is a structural chain theory, and this is classical theory of rural-urban migration. Classical theory of rural-urban migration. 10th, balanced versus unbalanced growth. Balanced versus unbalanced growth strategy. Balanced versus unbalanced growth strategy. Balanced versus unbalanced growth strategy. So one idea of the growth is that economy require balanced, that is simultaneous and synchronized development of different sectors of the economy. That means we have to develop all sectors of the economy at same point of time. Simultaneous development of all the sectors. Simultaneous development of the consumer goods, simultaneous development of the capital good, simultaneous development of the intermediate goods, simultaneous development of the basic goods, simultaneous development of the agriculture, simultaneous development of the industry. But if we see the Indian growth strategy, whether it was balanced growth strategy, Indian growth strategy is a balanced growth strategy? No, it was not a balanced growth strategy. We went initially for heavy industries. So that heavy industries focus was basically unbalanced. Create an imbalance, then again maintain a balance. Again create an imbalance, then again maintain a balance. That means it will be an outcome of chain of different disequilibrium. In order to have a balanced growth, you require a lot of resource. How you can make sure that all sectors will grow together? For that purpose economy must have enough, और अगर resource enough ही होते तो economy underdeveloped नहीं होती. The fact that economy is underdeveloped means that we cannot go for balance. That is why most of the countries went for, but as an idea we have to explain both. What is a balanced growth study and what is unbalanced growth study, and there are many sub part of it also. So you can write 11th. ठीक है, इसके अंदर अलग अलग पार्ट आ जाएंगे. रोजेंस्टन रॉडन का मॉडल है, बिग पुश थ्योरी का कंसेप्ट है. सो विल बी इलेबोरेटिंग डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ इट. Nux theory of development. Nux has given the vicious cycle of poverty concept, and that cycle operates in the demand side as well as in the supply side. That means economy is characterized by a vicious cycle. Vicious cycle interpretation, that to begin with economy has low per capita income. With low per capita income there will be low inducement to invest because the size of market is small. If we are investing low, there will be lower productivity of labor, and with lower productivity of labor the income will remain low. So low per capita income means low investment inducement. Low inducement to investment is lower amount of investment. With lower amount of investment there will be lower productivity of labor, and that will keep income also lower. So there is a vicious cycle operating in the supply side as well as on the demand side. So we'll elaborate that concept in Nux theory. ठीक है भाई, just you are making a list of the topic that we have to cover here. Big push theory given by Rosenstern Rodden. Rosenstern and Rodden. Critical minimum effort. Critical minimum effort theory. Critical minimum effort theory. Critical minimum effort theory given by Leibniz. Critical minimum effort theory given by Leibniz. That means in order to progress, in order to develop, economy must apply a critical thrust. If you are not applying a critical thrust, economy will not take off. Just as you require a critical thrust, the plane require a critical thrust in order to take off. जब तक force आप उससे कम apply करोगे तब तक वो take off नहीं कर रहा. Similarly, economy is also stagnant. So you require a critical minimum effort. If your effort is beyond that critical, economy will take off. Otherwise, economy will remain underdeveloped. 14. Medal theory of circular causation. Simply write Medal theory. Medal theory, MYRDL. Medal theory. Medal theory actually highlighted the impact of growth on inequality. That during the process of growth, there will be impact on the inequality. So initially inequality will increase and then inequality will decrease. And it has been explained by two important terms used by the Medal. One is the backwash effect of growth and other is called as spread effect of growth. So what backwash effect is basically when there will be growth of any particular center. If there will be growth of any particular center, then a resource will flow from other area to that area. So that region will develop and other region will be underdeveloped. So if there will be a growth center, then resources usually flow to that metropolitan cities, for example, from the other backward areas. So other backward areas are not deprived from their resources. The skilled labor will move from that area to the other area. Capital will move from other area to that area. So that was called as the backwash effect. The backwash effect will increase the inequality. But spread effect means this center itself will spread. So as that center itself will spread, or there can be many centers also, that will reduce inequality. So what is the backwash effect? What is the spread effect? We will elaborate that. But again, a frequently asked question is there. 15th is the concept of dependency model. Dependency model. Dependency model concept say that the development of developed countries are not contingent upon the development of less developed countries, but the development of less developed countries depend upon, that means your less developing countries, they are dependent on what? They are dependent upon the growth of developed countries. And why they are dependent? In what way they are dependent? In what way developing countries depend upon the developed countries? They depend upon in terms of the technology, they depend in terms of the capital. So the growth of one depend upon the growth of the other. 16th, Rostow stages of growth. Stages of growth. Rostow has basically given the historical view that in a growth process, economy passes through 5 different stages. So what were those 5 different stages explained by Rostow? Then next, concept of two-gap model. So the two important gap in the developing countries. Remember, the entire topic you are studying is basically for developing country point of view. Growth and development of what? Growth and development of which country we are referring to? It is the developing country we are referring to. So the two important gap which exist in the developing countries, one gap is the saving investment gap and other is the export import gap. Import export ka gap hai, other is the saving investment gap. So how those two gaps determine the growth process? Then one is limits to growth. Limits to growth. Limits to growth concept, the main idea say that when we explain that economy, aim of world economy is to have growth. But growth is a continuous process. You need growth every year. That means it must be in perpetuity. It must be continuous. But in order to have a continuous growth, you must have infinite resource available. Only then we can have continuous growth. But do we have infinite amount of resource? तो अगर वर्ल्ड ओवर रिसोर्स लिमिटेड है तो ग्रोथ का भी क्या अपना क्या होगा, एक लिमिट होगा. देयर विल बी अ लिमिट टू आवर growth and it is limited by what? our growth is limited by the resource that is available to us. So that will be the concept of last के जो topic लिख रहे हैं ये one of question paper में आ रखा है. It is not a regular question or frequently asked question, but initially what you have written is basically the regular question जो every year आ रहे हैं या multiple question आ रहे हैं वहाँ से. So I've written I think 18 models. ठीक है, 18 different models है, and in that तो मॉडल के फॉर्म में बेसिकली ये कंसेप्ट 18 few other models like जो इकोनॉमिक सर्विस के अलग वाले सेपरेट लेक्चर के अंदर कवर करें. विल बी एडिंग फ्यू मोर इन दिस लाइक शुम्पेटर ग्रोथ मॉडल है या मार्क्स का कंसेप्ट है, तो वो इकोनॉमिक थॉट वाले कैटेगरी के अंदर में भी रहेगा. सो बट दिस इज वेट इज वी कैन से 90% इज कॉमन. एंड इफ यू सी द क्वेश्चन पेपर ऑफ ग्रोथ एंड डेवलपमेंट, generally you will find 4-5 questions from this category. This for the optional growth and development. So one question like critically examine per capita GDP as a crude indicator of development. So whether per capita GDP is an indicator of development, so we will study it as a part of the welfare indicator. So welfare indicator is again part of the growth and development, although initially we will focus on the models and then we will go for the welfare indicators. एंड इकोनॉमिक सर्विस में ऐसा एक सिमिलर क्वेश्चन आ रखा है दैट वाई जीडीपी इज कॉल्ड एज द ग्रॉसली डिसेप्टिव प्रोडक्ट. वाई जीडीपी इज कॉल्ड एज द ग्रॉसली डिसेप्टिव प्रोडक्ट. वाई इट इज कॉल्ड ग्रॉसली डिसेप्टिव, मतलब मीनिंग ऑफ क्वेश्चन क्या हुआ? ये ग्रॉसली डिसेप्टिव प्रोडक्ट का मतलब होता है कि इट इज़ नॉट बेसिकली मेजरिंग व्हाट इट इंटेंड्स टू मेजर. इट इज़ नॉट जस्ट इट इज़ नॉट द ये क्वेश्चन नहीं है. वो ये कह रहा है कि वो वेलफेयर का इंडिकेटर नहीं है. और ग्रॉसली डिसेप्टिव प्रोडक्ट का मतलब हो गया कि एक्चुअली इट इज़ नॉट मेजरिंग व्हाट इट इंटेंड्स टू मेजर. सो व्हाट जीडीपी इंटेंड्स टू मेजर? जीडीपी इंटेंड्स टू मेजर व्हाट वी आर मेजरिंग थ्रू जीडीपी. It is what we are measuring through. But basically we are trying to measure the economic activity. जो economic activity है उसको measure कर रहे हैं in terms of the GDP. But whether all economic activities are measured in GDP, the answer is no. All economic activities are not measured in GDP. GDP is just the market value of all final goods and services produced in the economy during an accounting year. Market value of means we will take only those product जिसका मार्केट वैल्यू होगा. मार्केट वैल्यू का मतलब जिसका प्राइस है. प्राइस उसका होगा जो मार्केट में सेल होता है. जो मार्केट में सेल नहीं होता है उसका प्राइस तो फिर उससे हमने जीडीपी में कैलकुलेट नहीं किया. बट एक्चुअली दैट इज ऑल्सो इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी बट नॉट एक्सप्रेस और इंक्लूडेड इन दैट. सो विल टेक अप द ग्रोथ मॉडल सेपरेटली एंड दिस सेकेंड इज फॉर द like you can see the major topics. I was referring to the Lewis model. Then again welfare indicator का क्वेश्चन है. inequality, modified SDI, what is warranted rate of growth? So Harrod's model, again Lewis model, growth and development question again. ये environmental economics का क्वेश्चन है और Ernst and Roden view. So it is book big push theory. Then Harrod's model again. Human capital, just see the topic that you have mentioned basically. Lewis model again, third time. Multinational separate, we will discuss the essential feature of the growth model that incorporate research and development. So this is endogenous growth model. How is human development index calculated by UNDP? Can there be a better method of assigning weights? एक क्वेश्चन अभी लास्ट जो 25 में पेपर हुआ उसमें पूछा गया है हाउ द कंसेप्ट ऑफ ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट हैज़ इवॉल्व्ड सिंस 1990. 15 मार्क का कंप्लीट क्वेश्चन है. हाउ द कंसेप्ट ऑफ ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट हैज़ इवॉल्व्ड सिंस 1990. तो सिंस 1990 वी हैव द कंसेप्ट ऑफ HDI. बट HDI का कंसेप्ट सिंस 1990 तो है, बट ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम वेरियस अदर इंडिकेटर्स वर एडेड प्लस द ओरिजिनल कंसेप्ट जो SDI का था वो भी मॉडिफाई हुआ है. उसको मेज़र करने का जो तरीका है वो भी डिफरेंट हो चुका है, एंड देयर आर डिफरेंट अदर मेजर्स ऑल्सो। तो फिर पूरी क्रोनोलॉजी पता होनी चाहिए उस आंसर को लिखने के लिए कि 1990 to 2025 व्हाट आर द वेरियस indicators used by the UNDP. ठीक है, again you find Lewis model. So if you see the question you will find that there are some question जो बार बार repeat होकर के आ रहा होता है, मतलब उस question की frequency काफ़ी ज़्यादा है. In terms of the Solow model, what is Solow residual? This is again question from the Solow model. बैलेंस अनबैलेंस ग्रोथ के भी ऊपर क्वेश्चन है, बैलेंस एंड अनबैलेंस ग्रोथ स्टडी. एंड वन ऑफ क्वेश्चन व्हेन आई सेइंग इट वाज लिविंगस्टन क्रिटिकल मिनिमम एफर्ट थ्योरी बट नॉट रिपीटेड अगेन. लुइस मॉडल अगेन, बैकवाश एंड स्प्रेड इफेक्ट ऑफ मेडल 2012 में भी है, और ये क्वेश्चन आई थिंक 2017 इधर भी है, स्टार्ट में भी है. एक्सप्लेन मेडल क्यूमुलेटिव कॉजेशन थ्योरी ऑफ एज अ थ्योरी ऑफ डेवलपमेंट. डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चन है, मतलब यू विल हैव अ प्रिपेयर्ड राइट अप रेडी हियर, जस्ट एज इट इज लिखना है उसे. क्वेश्चन में कोई वेरिएशन नहीं है. एंड सिमिलरली व्हेन यू सी द क्वेश्चन ऑफ इकोनॉमिक सर्विस, ठीक है, इकोनॉमिक सर्विस वाले पेपर. हैरेट्स मॉडल, कैल्डर मॉडल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ, ह्यूमन पॉवर्टी इंडेक्स, डायमेंशंस ऑफ द ग्लोबल मल्टी डायमेंशनल पॉवर्टी इंडेक्स, वो वेलफेयर इंडिकेटर में कंपेयर हो जाएंगे सारे. क्वेश्चन ऑन सोलो मॉडल, एके मॉडल, concept of convergence and conditional and unconditional convergence, Rostow stages of growth, what is instrumental in solo growth model, major determinant of the growth as entailed in the endogenous growth model. Again convergence based upon solo model, but I was saying some separate topic for economic service. So separate is Marx and Schumpeter, so वो content separately will be adding it. Clear? So we will start first with the Solow model. ठीक है, उससे पहले if you want to write the source, so in terms of the source or different topic, but I will suggest one book is ML Jingan. Most of the content वहाँ से cover हो जाएगा. Most of the growth model you can cover from ML Jingan, that is economic development and planning book. And but what will be missing in that ML Jingan is basically the endogenous growth model. Like Roman model का बहुत elaborated description आपको नहीं मिलेगा, human capital का भी नहीं मिलना है. So for that purpose, 2 chapters from Jones. No need to buy that book. The xerox of these 2 chapters are included in your growth and development spiral. Then 2 chapters from Devraj Ray, mainly chapter number 3 and 4. And for one off question, in fact, just a few pages from AK Sen. And Solow model we can refer from Manque chapter number 7 and 8. Manque chapter number 7 and 8. Okay, so when we'll be starting with the other topic like environmental economics, तो वो कंटेंट अभी नहीं लिखे मैंने, environmental के लिए सेपरेट बुक हो जाएगी. So related to all the growth models, you have written this. Now write it for, begin with a Solow model. So in the Solow model, first we explain the basic model. That basic model means concept of steady state level of capital. Concept of steady state level of capital. So what is the meaning of a steady state? Then second we discuss effect of change in saving rate. Effect of change in saving rate. Effect of change in saving rate. So effect of change in saving rate on what? On steady state. And whether saving will cause permanent growth or whether it will cause only temporary growth. Third, effect of change in population growth. Effect of change in population growth. Effect of change in population growth. Fourth, effect of change in technology. Effect of change in technology. So how technological change will affect the economy. One is how saving rate change will affect the economy, other is how population growth will affect the economy, third is how technological progress growth will affect the economy. Then a specific concept of golden rule level of capital. So what is the meaning of golden rule level of capital? ये 2016 में ऑप्शन में क्वेश्चन पूछा गया. Golden rule level of capital. Golden rule level of capital. Then what is the difference between level effect and growth effect? Level effect versus growth effect. Level effect versus growth effect. Then idea of convergence. Idea of convergence. Within that there are two parts: conditional convergence and unconditional convergence. So what is a conditional convergence and what is unconditional convergence? Conditional and unconditional convergence. And 617 the question was on Solow residual. So what is the meaning of Solow residual and its significance? Solow residual and its significance. Clear? So you have actually written 18 models. ये फर्स्ट मॉडल का डिस्क्रिप्शन है फॉर द फर्स्ट मॉडल. फर्स्ट मॉडल के अंदर 7-8 टॉपिक है ये. सो इट विल टेक द फर्स्ट मॉडल इटसेल्फ विल टेक मोर देन 2 to 3 लेक्चर. ठीक है, तो कंटेंट बट लेटर ऑन बाद के जो मॉडल है वो एक दिन के अंदर 2 मॉडल आप कवर कर सकते हैं. देयर आर सम टॉपिक्स विच कैन बी कवर्ड इन अ शॉर्ट पीरियड ऑफ टाइम लाइक 2 गैप मॉडल, लिमिट्स टू ग्रोथ, रोस्टो थ्योरी, डिपेंडेंसी मॉडल. ये एक क्लास के अंदर हो जाएगा बट कंटेंट इन सोलो मॉडल इज मोर. सो आई एम स्टार्टिंग विद द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक इन द ग्रोथ एंड डेवलपमेंट सेक्शन, जिसका क्वेश्चन के फॉर्म में वेटेज ज़्यादा है और कंटेंट इज ऑल्सो वेरी मोर clear. So we start first with the basic model, the first one. Write on this heading, basic model. First thing about Solow model is that it is an example of neo classical model. Second, remember that it is an example of exogenous growth theory. It is an example of exogenous growth theory. Solow model is neoclassical and Solow model is an example of exogenous growth theory. So as per this model, y is a function of capital and labor, which is stated as a capital to the power alpha, labor to the power 1 minus alpha. A capital to the power alpha, labor to the power 1 minus alpha. So whenever a function is written in this order, production function, so now this is not production of a particular commodity, it is production of it is aggregate production. So this is also the, we can call it Cobb-Douglas production function. So Cobb-Douglas production function का example लिया गया Solow model में. So you can write this, y refers to output. Output can be denoted by y. It can be denoted by y. You can call it output or you can call it GDP. जैसे ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट, तो आप एग्रीगेट आउटपुट भी कह सकते हैं या जीडीपी भी कह सकते हैं. सो दैट एग्रीगेट आउटपुट डिपेंड्स अपॉन 3 थिंग्स: टेक्नोलॉजी, कैपिटल स्टॉक एंड लेबर फोर्स. सो इट डिपेंड अपॉन टेक्नोलॉजी, इट डिपेंड अपॉन कैपिटल एंड इट डिपेंड अपॉन labor. Now what we'll be doing basically that means if you have to just explain the main idea of the model. So how we can explain the main idea of the model? Solow model is actually designed to examine what? Solow model is designed to examine how technology, capital and labor interact in an economy and how that interaction determine output and therefore growth of that output. We have to explain the growth of what? Growth of output. So first we must understand what determines the output. If you are able to explain what determines the output, then we can easily explain what determines the growth of that output. So output is determined by, in this model, output is determined by technology, it is determined by capital, it is determined by labor. So growth of the output will be determined by growth of technology, growth of capital and growth of labor. But we have to build this model in a series of steps. So what we will be doing initially that we will initially keep labor constant and technology constant. So if I keep A constant and L constant, then A और L को अगर मैंने constant मान लिया तो growth किसकी वजह से होगा? फिर सिर्फ capital की वजह से होगा. So how capital accumulation will determine the growth, we will study that. Then we will study how labor force change will affect it, and then how labor technological change will affect it. Therefore you have written different topics. How saving rate will affect the growth, how population growth will affect, and how technical progress will affect. So first just explain the main idea of the model. That means irrespective of the question you can write that sentence. So write down the main idea. Solow model is designed to show Solow model is designed to show how growth in capital stock. Solow model is designed to show how growth in capital stock, growth in labor force, and advances in technology interact in an economy and how they affect total output of goods and services of an economy. Goods and services of an economy. Goods and services of an economy. I'll say one thing. When since we are studying the growth process, so if I ask what are the indicator of growth, since we are studying the growth model, so what are the indicator of growth? How we will get to know that economy is progressing? If I ask what is the growth rate of India, so you will naturally quote the growth rate of the GDP. That means we assume that the growth is determined by growth of GDP. So growth is basically indicated by growth of GDP. GDP को यहाँ Y के symbol से denote कर रहे हैं. But is GDP a better indicator of growth? Suppose GDP doubles, but along with that population also doubles. Then GDP per capita will remain same. So what is a better indicator of growth? Better indicator of growth will be GDP per capita. So the other indicator and the better indicator is GDP per capita. GDP per capita. So you can write it by Y by L and denote it by small y. Whenever you write capital Y, it is GDP, small y, it is GDP per capita, or GDP per labor you can also say. So the better indicator of growth is basically growth of GDP per capita. One is the growth, other is GDP per capita. That is, one is GDP and the other is GDP per capita. Clear? So now in the initial part, you have basically written that Y is a function of capital, labor and technology. So in that function, it is written as GDP is a function of A, K and L. But we are more interested in knowing the growth of GDP per capita. So can you calculate GDP per capita from here? GDP per capita is Y by L. So if I simply divide it by L, I will get the GDP per capita number. So if you write in terms of GDP, you have written Y is equal to A, capital to the power alpha, labor to the power 1 minus alpha. ये aggregate function हो गया. And in terms of GDP per capita, that is Y by L. It will be A capital to the power alpha, labor to the power 1 minus alpha upon L. So Y by L, small y, and what will be this number? A common रखिएगा, it will become K by L to the power alpha. So small y is equal to A. If Y by L denoted by small y, we can write K by L by small k to the power alpha. ठीक है, एग्जाम्पल के लिए सपोज इफ आई गिव यू numerical number by writing y is equal to k to the power 0.5 L to the power 0.5. Can you write it in terms of GDP per capita? ये एग्रीगेट का फंक्शन दे दिया मैंने, पावर दे दिया, ए की वैल्यू 1 कर दी, तो राइट इन टर्म्स ऑफ जीडीपी पर कैपिटा. सो व्हाट विल बी जीडीपी पर कैपिटा? वाई बाई एल, के टू द पावर 0.5 एल टू द पावर 0.5 डिवाइडेड बाई एल. ये स्मॉल एल हो जाएगा और ये के बाई एल टू द पावर 0.5 हो गया. सो इट इज स्मॉल के टू द पावर 0.5, दैट मीन्स अंडर रूट के. ठीक है. So if I say that the stock of capital is 100, then how much is the output? If small k is 100, then output is 10. If k doubles, then output will not double. ठीक है. Under root 100 will become 10, but under root 200 is not 20. That means as k will increase, output will increase, but at a decreasing rate. Solow model is based upon diminishing return to capital. Solow model is based upon diminishing return to capital, but it is based upon constant returns to scale. Constant returns to scale means if you increase capital and labor both by a certain proportion, output is also changed by same proportion. अगर capital labor दोनों को हमने change किया, then output will change by same proportion. But if you increase only capital, then output will not change in the same proportion. So it is based upon diminishing return to capital. तो बीच बीच में मैं ये कहीं इक्वेशन लिख रहा हूँ, इट इज़ नॉट नेसेसरली अ पार्ट ऑफ योर आंसर कि पूरा का पूरा कंटेंट आपको आंसर में यूज़ करना है. व्हाट यू विल बी यूजिंग इन आंसर इज बेसिकली दैट इनिशियल स्टेटमेंट एंड दिस इक्वेशन इन टर्म्स ऑफ एग्रीगेट एंड दिस इक्वेशन इन टर्म्स ऑफ पर कैपिटा. क्लियर? राइट ऑन नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ. Solow model is based on Solow model is based on law of Solow model is based on law of diminishing return to individual factor of production. Solow model is based on law of diminishing return to individual factor of production. Law of diminishing return to individual factor of production. It means that as stock of capital increases, then output will increase at decreasing rate. Output will increase at decreasing rate. This imply that marginal product of capital decreases. 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 That means if you write here y and here small k, then you have to plot the production function like this, diminishing return. This is y as a function of k. If a function has a specific form like under root k, so it will means that if a capital stock is 100, then corresponding to that output capital stock 100, output will be 10. But if you increase capital to 200, then output will not become 20. It will be less than 20. That will be under root 200. Output will increase with capital, but it will increase at diminishing rate. Next paragraph. We can build Solow model. We can build Solow model, or we can develop Solow model. We can build Solow model in a series of steps. We can build Solow model in a series of steps. Series of steps. So in the first step we assume that. In the first step we assume that. In the first step we assume that labor force and technology are constant. Labor force and technology are constant. Labor force and technology are constant. So output can change only due to. So output can change only due to change in capital stock. Output can change only due to change in capital stock. Only due to change in capital stock. मतलब इनिशियल स्टेप पे हमने क्या कांस्टेंट रखा हुआ है अभी? लेबर कांस्टेंट रखा है और टेक्नोलॉजी को भी कांस्टेंट रखा है. तो आउटपुट विच इज अ फंक्शन ऑफ ए कैपिटल टू द पावर अल्फा लेबर टू द पावर 1 माइनस अल्फा. सो इफ दिस इज अ फंक्शन then if a constant and L constant, then y can change only because of change in capital. So in the first step we will keep these two constants. Second step में ये variable करेंगे. Third step में ये भी variable कर लेंगे. So in the third step all will become variable. Next paragraph. Solow model is based on the assumption of. Solow model is based on the assumption of. Solow model is based on the assumption of constant returns to scale. Solow model is based on the assumption of constant returns to scale. Constant returns to scale, underline that term, is based upon constant returns to scale. So whenever you use the word scale, it means what? I'm saying constant returns to scale. Constant returns to scale का मतलब होता है कि if you change capital and labor both, if you change capital and labor both, then output will change in the same proportion. When I say diminishing return to a factor, that means if I'm saying diminishing return to a factor, so diminishing return to a factor, it means you are changing only one factor, not all factor. But scale means you are changing all the factors. Which means that when labor and capital both will be increased, which means that when labor and capital both will be increased, labor and capital both will be increased in a given proportion, then output will increase in the same proportion. Then output will increase in the same proportion. When capital and labor both will be increased in a given proportion, then output will increase in the same proportion. Output will increase in the same proportion. This line means that since you have written y as a function of capital and labor, so if you increase capital and labor both in a certain proportion, that means if you increase capital by t times and labor also by t times, then output will also increase by t times. जिस proportion में factors change होंगे उसी proportion में output change हो जाएगा. Now if I assume this t as 1 by L, then how you can write this equation? टी मान लिया 1/L है, तो ये y/L हो जाएगा. So this will become y/L as a function of k/L comma 1. This y/L can be written as small y, k/L can be written as small k. One constant number है, you have just ignored from the function. Y is a function of k. So y function of k actually imply that if you write here y and k, then it is increasing at decreasing rate. You have already drawn that. Y as a function of k. That means what will be the output that depend upon how much is capital. If capital is 100, then output is 10. If capital is 200, then output will be under root 200. So this is actually one side of the model which is referred as the supply side. ये हमारा supply side है. How much will be the supplied? Now we move from supply side to demand side. ठीक है, this is the equation basically written in the supply side. Now move from supply to the demand. Production function is actually supply. How much you are able to produce, that means how much you are able to supply in the economy. Now move from supply side to the demand side. Just focus here. If I write demand in the economy, that means in macro you also write y is equal to AD. Correct? Y is also equal to AD. And what are the component of aggregate demand? Consumption invest plus government plus net export. Consider economy closed. X minus m नहीं लिखना है. Consider economy consists of only two sectors. That is no government, no tax, no subsidy. We are discussing only two sectors. So y is equal to c plus I. Now these numbers are actually aggregate numbers. ये aggregate output है, ये aggregate consumption है और ये aggregate investment है. बट हमने सप्लाई साइड को किस में कन्वर्ट कर रखा है? व्हाट इज दिस? ये पर कैपिटा है, तो अगर ये पर कैपिटा है तो उसे भी पर कैपिटा में कन्वर्ट करना है, डिमांड साइड को भी. सो इफ आई डिवाइड दिस नंबर बाई एल, तो सी बाई एल प्लस आई बाई एल हो जाएगा. वट विल यू राइट इन प्लेस ऑफ वाई बाई एल? वट इज वाई बाई एल? पढ़ना क्या है इसको? GDP per capita या output per capita या output per labor. So if Y by L is output per capita, then what is C by L? Consumption per capita. What is I by L? Investment per capita. Just write it by small c and small I. Clear? And just one thing, whatever be the income generated, that is output per capita, a fraction of it is spent on consumption and a fraction is saved. So we save one fraction and we consume the remaining. So if I say that the saving rate is small s, smallest saving rate है, right? Like you can read it as 0.2. 20% of income is saved. So what will be the amount of saving you will write? Income का 20% save किया हमने. So you can write small s into y. So amount of saving can be written as small s into y. So remaining part, that is 1 minus s, is spent. So what will be in place of consumption? You can write 1 minus s into y. ठीक है, तो मैं यहाँ कंजम्पशन की जगह क्या लिखूँ? 1 minus s into y. So just write that In place of C you write 1 minus S into Y plus I. ठीक है, एक्सपैंड करेंगे तो क्या हो जाएगा, स्मॉल y इज इक्वल टू स्मॉल y माइनस स्मॉल एस वाई प्लस आई. ये y एक्चुअल में कैंसिल आउट हो गया. सो व्हाट इज लेफ्ट, स्मॉल एस वाई इज इक्वल टू आई, स्मॉल एस वाई इक्वल टू y. व्हाट डज दैट मीन, व्हाट इज स्मॉल एस इंटू y, व्हाट इज स्मॉल एस इंटू y, small s into y is saving. So that saving is equal to what, investment. Small s is saving rate, small s into y is saving amount. So saving is equal to, which is correct in a two sector model. In a two sector model at equilibrium level of income, saving must be equal to investment. So if you plot this line now, see what you have drawn already is the consumption line, function line. You have drawn that y here. So can you plot this small s y? इनकम का एक फ्रैक्शन सेव करेंगे, फ्रैक्शन सेव करना है. That means out of this income a fraction will be saved. So if that fraction is saved, then your small s y will be below it. Small s into y, both will start from the same point. Small s y. So based upon any given stock of capital, suppose if I mark any stock of capital K, then what will be the output? For this amount of K, what will be the output? Output will be determined from the production function. So you can write it from the production function. This is y. So if this is the stock of capital, then for this stock of capital the output will be determined from the production function, and from this point you will determine what? From this point I will determine income per capita. From this point I will determine saving. So gap between income and saving is consumption. So that gap is referring to, this gap is referring to consumption. This gap is referring to consumption.
जैसे सेविंग्स एक प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ इनकम है, ऐसे ही कंजम्पशन भी प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ इनकम है. तो सर हम सेविंग्स कर्व बनाने की जगह कंजम्पशन कर्व की भी सेम शेप होगी.
हाँ, सेम होगा, बिकॉज अ फ्रैक्शन हम इनकम का सेव करते हैं, फ्रैक्शन कंज्यूम करते हैं. सो एज विल इनकम विल इंक्रीज, सेविंग विल ऑल्सो इंक्रीज, कंजम्पशन विल ऑल्सो इंक्रीज. सेविंग इज ऑल्सो डायरेक्ट फंक्शन ऑफ इनकम, कंजम्पशन ऑल्सो डायरेक्ट फंक्शन ऑफ इनकम. इनकम का एक फ्रैक्शन है तो कंज्यूम होता है और रिमेनिंग फ्रैक्शन हम सेव करते हैं. सो इफ यू ड्रॉ द कंजम्पशन लाइन, देन ऑल्सो द लाइन विल बी, बट नॉट एग्जैक्ट. ओवरलैप नहीं करेगा. ओवरलैप कब कर सकता है? जब दोनों का रेट सेम हो जाए, अदरवाइज तो ये डिफरेंट हो जाएंगे. बट दो बोथ विल बी पॉजिटिव स्लोप. राइट.
सर ये जो ग्राफ की लाइन है ये रेट दिखा रही है?
नहीं, ग्राफ की जो लाइन है उस पर रेट कांस्टेंट है. ग्राफ की जो लाइन है उस पर रेट कांस्टेंट है. दैट मीन्स ऑन दिस लाइन स्मॉल एस कांस्टेंट है. सेविंग चेंज हो रहा है बिकॉज ऑफ चेंज इन व्हाट, इनकम. इफ यू चेंज दिस रेट ऑफ सेविंग तो ये कर्व शिफ्ट हो जाएगा.
और सर हम गैप से जो कंजम्पशन देख रहे हैं वो
अमाउंट ऑफ कंजम्पशन है. 1 माइनस एस इंटू वाई है वो. That done. In the basic Solow model, in the basic Solow model, in the basic Solow model, demand for goods comes from, in the basic Solow model, demand for goods comes from, demand for goods comes from consumption and investment. Demand for goods comes from consumption and investment. Full stop. It means output per worker, it means output per worker is divided between, it means output per worker is Y by L. Output per worker is divided between consumption per worker and investment per worker and investment per worker, investment per worker इक्वेशन के फॉर्म में स्मॉल y इज इक्वल टू स्मॉल c प्लस स्मॉल i, स्मॉल y इक्वल टू स्मॉल c प्लस स्मॉल i. Below that, the model assumes that the model assumes that a constant fraction of income, a constant fraction of income, constant fraction of income, constant fraction of income ब्रैकेट में स्मॉल s, जो फ्रैक्शन है वो स्मॉल s है. A constant fraction of income is saved and remaining fraction of income, remaining fraction of income within bracket 1 minus s, remaining fraction of income is spent on consumption, is spent on consumption. Therefore we can write equation as, therefore we can write equation as, we can write equation as, we can write equation as, just it was clear, equation as y equal to 1 minus sy plus I और फिर y cancel out करके small s y equal to y, these three. That means in whenever I say write plot investment, you can write what? Saving. Saving is equal to, so this line can be interpreted as the line of saving also, it can be interpreted as the line of investment also. Saving equal to investment. It means savings per capita will be equal to investment per capita. It means savings per capita will be equal to investment per capita. Savings per capita will be equal to investment per capita. So up to this was basically a tool for understanding the Solow model. Now we can explain the first part of it, which is a steady state level of capital. Subtopic वहाँ पे steady state level of capital. Just now understand this part. At any given point of time, we will have a stock of capital. But if I write small k, it will be capital K upon L. So suppose if I say that the stock of capital in 2025, so this is stock of capital in 2025, labor of 2025, and I am interested in knowing what is the stock of capital in the year 2026. So what will cause the change? What will cause the change in this stock of capital? When this stock of capital will change? Because K determine Y, so I am more interested in knowing what determine the K. If K will change, then output will change. Y is a function of K. So if there is a given number of K today, what will cause the change in that K? This can change because of two reasons. First thing, in the first step, हमने लेबर को क्या माना हुआ है? तो लेबर of 2025 and 26 will remain, ये डिनोमिनेटर चेंज नहीं हो रहा है, change will be only in this whatever be the plant and machinery today, over a period of time when you will use that plant and machinery in the production process, its value will decrease due to depreciation. So the stock of capital will fall because of, it will decrease due to depreciation. If I say that 10% is depreciated, so what is the amount of depreciation? 10% depreciated, so 10% को डेल्टा के सिंबल से डिनोट किया इंटू के. ऐसे मान लो अगर ये स्टॉक का कैपिटल 40 है, मैं कह रहा हूँ 10% से डेप्रिसिएट हो रहा है, तो 40 का 10% 4 डेप्रिसिएट हो गया, तो यहाँ हो गया 0.1 एंड दिस इज 40. सो delta into K is the amount of depreciation. When this stock of capital will increase, stock of capital increase कब होगा? When you will buy more machinery. Buying more machinery is called investment. So this stock will increase because of, this will increase because of investment, and investment is equal to what? Saving. And how much is saving? Saving is small s into y. And what is y? Y is a function of k. So you can write it as function of k also. ठीक है? So if I say what determines the change in the stock of capital, then what you will write in terms of the equation? This stock will increase because of investment, decrease because of, so the change will be determined by the difference of these two. So delta K is equal to what? Investment minus depreciation. Investment minus depreciation. So in place of investment you write as function of K, that is y, and depreciation delta into K. So if investment is more, depreciation is less, then stock will increase. If depreciation is more, investment is less, then stock will, and if both are equal, then stock will remain same, and that is the meaning of steady state. So what is a steady state? It is that state where there will be no change in capital per worker, which means investment must be equal to depreciation. So at a steady state, you will write that at a steady state delta K is equal to 0, which means S function of K minus delta K is equal to 0. और जब ये 0 से equate करेंगे, then you will get a specific number, and that stock of capital will be referred as steady state. Steady state के लिए मैंने star mark रखा. Steady state is basically that state where stock of capital will neither increase nor it will decrease. It is that state where stock is neither increasing nor it is declining. So if now the question is, what is the significance of this concept? What is the significance of steady state? Significance of steady state will be that if you explain this graphically, यहाँ तक कर लिया? So if you explain this graphically, just see this part. I am writing here K, and on axis it is a depreciation and investment. Investment is nothing but saving, and what is depreciation? Depreciation is delta into K. ये depreciation का amount है. What determines the slope of this line? The line can be steeper or flatter depending upon that number of delta. And investment is nothing but savings. So S function of K, their equality will determine steady state. Equality determine करेगा steady state को. ठीक है, ट्राई टू कीप इट पॉजिटिव. ऐसे पॉजिटिव ही रखने की कोशिश करना. ठीक है, बिकॉज सेविंग और इन्वेस्टमेंट डिक्लाइन नहीं होंगे, वो इट विल इंक्रीज बट डिक्रीजिंग रेट होगा. सो जस्ट आंसर वन पार्ट नाउ. If I say that the stock of capital is K1 not K star, if stock of capital is K1 rather than K star, then what will be the outcome? If stock of capital is less than steady state, then what is the outcome? See here, at this stock of capital we find that amount of depreciation is less and investment is, so due to more investment stock will increase. So stock of capital will continue to increase till it reaches steady state. And if stock is more than steady state, then what will happen? If it is more than, investment will be less, depreciation is more, depreciation will reduce stock of capital. That means irrespective of whether you begins with K1 or K2, you will always end up at K star. इसलिए K star को हम लॉन्ग रन इक्विलिब्रियम कहते हैं. ये इकोनॉमी का लॉन्ग रन इक्विलिब्रियम है. दिस इज लॉन्ग रन इक्विलिब्रियम ऑफ द इकोनॉमी. K star is long run equilibrium. Long run equilibrium of the economy. So at steady state we find that the value of K is constant. Now if K is constant, then naturally Y will also be constant, because Y is a function of K. So if I say that economy is at a steady state, it means the stock of capital and the stock of output, stock of capital for the year 2025, stock of capital for the year 2026, stock of capital for the year 2027, all will remain. अगर economy steady state पे है, then there will be no change. So K will remain same for all the years. Similarly, Y for 2025, for 2026, 2027, all will remain same. ठीक है? So if Y is same, it means if you plot it graphically by plotting your time or year on x-axis, or if I write here Y, so what will be the plotting? Every year का GDP per capita क्या है? Same है. Same है तो ये line horizontal हो जाएगी. For every year the value will remain same. So GDP per capita for every year will remain same. But if it is same for every year, then is there any growth? The answer is no. There is no growth. Steady state पे कोई growth नहीं होता है. There is no growth at a steady state. Now just recall which two factor we have made constant. कौन से दो factor हमने constant लिए हुए हैं अभी? Technology constant लिया और labor constant लिया. So if I ask about capital Y, see, जब आप स्मॉल y लिख रहे हो यहाँ पे, जस्ट आई विल कम बैक टू दिस, स्मॉल y जब लिखा है हमने तो एक कैपिटल Y अपॉन L लिखा है, प्लस इन द फर्स्ट स्टेप वी आर अज्यूमिंग दिस L टू रिमेन कांस्टेंट. सो इफ दिस L इज कांस्टेंट एंड स्टेडी स्टेट पे Y कांस्टेंट है, इसका मतलब ये कैपिटल Y भी क्या होगा फिर? कांस्टेंट होगा. कैपिटल Y की वैल्यू भी, कैपिटल Y की वैल्यू कांस्टेंट होने का मतलब होता है जीडीपी फॉर द ईयर 2025 एंड जीडीपी फॉर द ईयर 2026 एंड जीडीपी फॉर द ईयर 2027 ऑल विल रिमेन नो ग्रोथ. स्टेडी स्टेट पे देयर विल बी नो ग्रोथ इन द इकोनॉमी. सो देन क्वेश्चन इज व्हाट कॉजेज ग्रोथ. ठीक है, आपने अभी सिर्फ स्टेडी स्टेट एक्सप्लेन किया, देन वी एक्सप्लेन व्हाट विल कॉज growth. So there are various factors, like you can change saving rate, you can change population growth rate, you can change technical progress growth rate. Just complete up to this part. ऐसे कैलकुलेट कर सकते हो अगर कोई नंबर में गिवन हो तो, कोई कैलकुलेशन अगर दिया जाए, कैन यू कैलकुलेट दिस न्यूमेरिकली, दैट मीन्स कैन यू कैलकुलेट दिस वैल्यू. केस स्टार निकाल लोगे अगर कोई फंक्शन गिवन हो. Like if I write a function as y is equal to capital to the power 0.5 labor to the power 0.5, ये aggregate है, capital Y है, and saving rate is 30%, depreciation rate is 10%. So find K star and Y star. But यहाँ ये जो लिखा है ये small y है और small k है, और जो गिवन है वो कैपिटल की है. सो व्हाट इज के स्टार एंड वाई स्टार? फाइंड करना है नंबर कैलकुलेट करके. सी द सॉल्यूशन पार्ट फर्स्ट. सबसे पहले क्या करेंगे इसे, दिस इज एग्रीगेट एंड वी नीड स्मॉल. So first of all you will convert that aggregate into small. So we write y is equal to capital to the power 0.5 labor to the power 0.5 and then divided by L. So small y is equal to, this will become k by L to the power 0.5, which is small k to the power 0.5, which is under root k. Then you write at steady state, delta k is equal to 0. And what is delta k? Investment minus depreciation. Investment is saving. Saving is smallest into y minus delta into k equal to 0. y की जगह क्या लिखूं, फंक्शन ऑफ k माइनस डेल्टा k इक्वल टू 0 और फंक्शन ऑफ k की जगह क्या आ जाएगा, y एज अ फंक्शन ऑफ k है, क्या लिख देना वहाँ, रूट k लिख देना. इस फंक्शन की जगह रूट k कर दीजिएगा. सो विल राइट स्मॉल एस रूट k माइनस डेल्टा k इक्वल टू 0. Now just substitute the numbers. How much is saving rate? 0.3 under root k minus 0.1 k equal to 0. और यहाँ से k के लिए सॉल्व कर ले इक्वेशन, सॉल्व फॉर k. And that will be the steady state value of k. Steady state value of k हो जाएगा. ठीक है, कुछ नहीं करना. एक नंबर माइनस साइन वाले नंबर को राइट साइड कर लो और फिर 0.3 बाय 0.1 आ जाएगा और k अपॉन अंडर रूट के आ जाएगा. स्क्वायर कर लोगे तो k की वैल्यू क्या देगी, k विल बी 9. अब k की वैल्यू अगर 9 है तो व्हाट विल बी द y अंडर रूट k है तो इट विल बी 3. ये दो आंसर मिल गए. स्टेडी स्टेट पे कोई ग्रोथ नहीं होता, जस्ट रिमेंबर दैट पॉइंट, बट इट इज नॉट अ फाइनल कंक्लूजन. जैसे फर्स्ट क्लास का कंक्लूजन है जिसमें कह रहे हैं स्टेडी स्टेट पे देयर इज नो growth because we have kept labor constant and we have kept technology constant. Let's conclude this steady state. Next paragraph में at any given point of time, at any given point of time, at any given point of time, stock of capital at any given point of time, stock of capital is an important factor. At any given point of time, stock of capital is an important factor that determine the output of an economy, that determine the output of an economy. But capital stock can change over time. But capital stock can change over time. Capital stock can change over time. And those changes can lead to economic growth. Those changes can lead to economic growth. full stop. It means economic growth is outcome of, it means economic growth is outcome of accumulating more capital. Economic growth is outcome of accumulating more capital. Economic growth is outcome of accumulating more capital. Just underline that line. Economic growth is outcome of accumulating more capital. Next paragraph. In particular, two forces influence capital stock. In particular, two forces influence capital stock. In particular, two forces influence capital stock. A, investment, and B, depreciation. A, investment, B, depreciation. Below that, investment refers to expenditure on new plant and machinery. Investment refers to expenditure on new plant and machinery. And it causes capital stock to rise. Investment refers to expenditure on new plant and machinery, and it causes capital stock to rise. मतलब investment की वजह से capital stock will increase. On the other hand, depreciation refers to wearing out of old capital. Depreciation refers to wearing out of old capital. The normal wear and tear during production process called depreciation. Wearing out of old capital. And it causes value of capital stock to fall. Therefore, change in capital stock is determined by difference between investment and depreciation. Is determined by difference between investment and depreciation. So you are basically explaining this process. इस format में symbolically सिर्फ लिखना नहीं है that delta K is investment and depreciation. So change in the capital stock is determined by difference between investment and depreciation. If investment exceeds depreciation, then stock of capital will increase. If investment exceeds depreciation, then stock of capital will increase. But when depreciation exceeds investment, then stock of capital will decrease. Therefore, when investment is exactly equal to depreciation, then stock of capital will remain constant. And it will be called steady state level of capital. It will be called steady state level of capital. It will be called steady state level of capital. Next paragraph. At a steady state, there is no change in, at a steady state there is no change in capital stock, there is no change in capital stock, and it represent long run equilibrium of economy. It represent long run equilibrium of economy. Underline that. It represent long run equilibrium of economy. Long run equilibrium of economy. Full stop. It shows that regardless of the level of capital, with which economy begins, regardless of the level of capital with which economy begins, that means whether it begins from K1 or K2, regardless of the level of capital with which economy begins, it will always end up at steady state level of capital. It will always end up at steady state level of capital. It will always end up at steady state level of capital. Yes, so steady means basically that your GDP per capita and the GDP both are steady. That means in different period of time it will remain same. There is no change in that. But if there is no change, that means there is no growth. So far we have not explained growth. We have just explained the steady state part. So we have only described the first part of it, the basic part, which is the meaning of the term steady state. Naturally, we are more interested in knowing the growth. So growth will be due to change in, but I said there are two indicators. One is the GDP, other is GDP per, and out of these two, which one is better indicator? Per capita. So we are more interested in knowing what will cause change in GDP per. That will be the third one. So next we explain, so far we have explained only that what determine the steady state. So this is only first part of, we have written that 18 models. In that 18, first model, Solow model. For Solow model you have written all these topics and you have done the first part of it. So tomorrow it will be saving rate, population growth, and I think technology. यहाँ तक आ जाएगा. And then golden rule also. You can take a golden rule earlier as well. ठीक है, तो सोच के रखेगा. It will be a time taking unit, I will say, because model itself will take some time, all these models to be covered, and weightage is more. Last year अभी current जो मेंस हुआ उसके अंदर भी 2 क्वेश्चन है related to the growth models. एक हैरोडोमन, in fact there are 3 questions. 2 question हैरोडोमन models related है, and one is for the endogenous growth model. I think ठीक है, I will show that question tomorrow. Now you can see that question. ठीक है, इसमें सेक्शन बी के अंदर ये भी जो मेंस अभी लास्ट वीक हुआ उसमें फर्स्ट यू कैन सी दैट क्वेश्चन नंबर 1 question was this. Write down the this one. What write down the implication of the knife edge problem in the Harrod model. ठीक है, अभी जो मेन सभी कंक्लूड हुआ उसमें एक क्वेश्चन ये पूछा गया कंपल्सरी में. सेकेंड क्वेश्चन यू कैन फाइंड विद दिस ग्रोथ एंड डेवलपमेंट इज critically examine the role of human capital and research and development in the framework of indigenous growth model, and define the concept of natural rate of growth in the Harrod's model. You can find two questions from the Harrod model. एक कंपल्सरी में भी हैरोड मॉडल है और यहाँ 15 मार्क्स में भी हैरोड मॉडल है. ठीक है, सो यूजुअली 3 to 4 क्वेश्चन, अगर आप ये मॉडल वाला क्वेश्चन देखेंगे तो 2 से 3 रहते हैं, बट इफ़ यू ऐड प्लानिंग, इन्वायरमेंटल एंड सो ऑन, देन नंबर ऑफ क्वेश्चन इज मोर. ठीक है, सो विल कंटिन्यू टुमारो विद दिस. हाँ 3:30 तक इंडियन इकॉनमी 3:30.